Jared McCain just having his surgery, and as we know, he is out indefinitely. But the biggest question, who will continue to step up in his absence? We're going to break it all down right here on Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 76ers. We're your hosts, Keith Pompey and Kayla Santiago. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we're going to be talking about key role players all episode today because for the Philadelphia 76ers, they need key pieces to be able to help this team get out of the hole that they created. We saw it in the last game, but that needs to continue going forward, especially in this month of December. So we're going to start things off with a big fellow down low, and not Joel Embiid, but Oubre Jr. He was a monster on the glass in the last game. And Keith, he's somebody that really needs to continue to step up in that way, down low, especially being that rim protector that we all know throughout the season, especially Joel Embiid still being out.
Yeah, I think more so when Joel comes back. I think that the thing about Drummond is they got him because the team struggles on the boards. And, the thing that I really like about him is that, I think that Paul George and a couple other people got are getting a lot of the praise based off of what they've been doing offensively. But if you look at Drummond, the last couple games, he's really been performing well. The first game that he came back, Drummond had 11 rebounds. He had 5 of them were offensive, 6 on the defensive end. He had 7 points. And then the last game they played, he had 15 boards, 3 offensive. And he did that against a team, the Charlotte Hornets, that really are very good in offensive rebounds. They rank 4th in the league. So his 12 defensive rebounds were huge because he was, taking people out of position. So when I look at Drummond and I look at the things that he does, he's shooting more efficiently. The last game he was 4 for 7. The game before that he was 3 for 6. When you look at a guy like that, it's one of those things. As long as he could keep playing that role, he's going to be able to help the Sixers out as they rely on offense from Maxey and Paul George. So I feel like of all the guys that they have, in regards to him doing his role, he is the most important player in my eyes amongst the role players moving forward.
Averaging just under 9 rebounds total per game. Once again, he was injured a little throughout this year too, just under 8 points as well per game throughout the season so far, and 52% from the field. Another thing I look at Oubre Drummond is just the veteran leadership that he has, especially in terms of, we've touched on Guerschon Yabusele last time out and how he's been struggling. That's somewhere I feel like Oubre Drummond can really help him out. Not only that, Drummond is a huge fan of Adem Bona. I mean, he was able to come to the Bluecoats game and Adem Bona was there on assignment and was just having conversations with him. He was there in the locker room talking with Bona, saying, hey, this is what you need to do better. And Bona has been out that last game. But at the same time, you're looking at not only Drummond being a very good player on the court is what you need him to be, but also a leader in the locker room. Just Keith, looking at Guerschon Yabusele and the absence of Joel Embiid, how important is that leadership of Oubre Drummond for the Philadelphia 76ers at this point of the season?
I mean, it's important. It is, but at the same time, I think, they're different types of players too. True. And I hate to say it, but Guerschon has been struggling as of late. So he can be in his ear and all that, but I think it's more like Guerschon is also a guy he's older. That leadership is more for like Adem Bona, more for like the two-way players. Like, just like when Maxey was a young guy, his first year, it was huge for that. It was more for like Jared McCain. Like, I think Yabusele, he was in the league for a while. He played overseas for like 5 years. Guys like that, I don't think is really that big of a deal just because they already know the thing. But when we talk about Drummond stats, here's the one thing I will say. You said, a little bit less than 9 points. I mean, 9 rebounds a game. Drummond is ranked 21st in the league with 8.6 rebounds, but he only plays 20.5 minutes, right? But when you go per 36 minutes, Andre Drummond is ranked second in the league in rebounds at 15. Kevin Looney is number one at 16.6. Drummond is number two at 15. Clint Capella is number three at 14.7. So that's where you get the impact at. But as far as like leadership, he is a guy that's, even killed. He's a cool guy. Everybody likes him off the court. But I feel like his leadership role is better for the younger guys than the guys who are, similar age as him and things like that.
And they have a lot of other vets too. You look at Kyle Lowry kind of, being in the year, even Jared McCain, when McCain was healthy and playing as well for Tyrese Maxey. You look at Paul George, Joel Embiid. There's a lot of vets on this team. And we've even said, sometimes they have put in the younger guys a little bit to be able to run up and down the floor. But nevertheless, Andre Drummond definitely a crucial part to the Philadelphia 76ers going forward with the absence and even with the play of Joel Embiid, going to just back him up throughout those games too. Somebody I look at and somebody we've been talking about a lot is Kelly Oubre and how he played in that last game. The Philadelphia 76ers have Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, yes, combined for 73 points. But Kelly Oubre was able to make his minutes count, especially later in that game last time around against the Hornets. How do you evaluate his performance so far on the season, and where do you kind of see him maybe taking a step up with the absence of Jared McCain and also at times being looked at as that third or fourth scorer?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I mean, I know he is a role player, but because of everything that's happened, I stopped looking at him as one, right? I mean, I looked at him as, you look at Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre has been a guy that, and this is how you look at him stepping up. Kelly Oubre has been a guy who's been a starter wherever he has been, right? He comes to the Sixers, he has to find his niche. His role is ever changing and he keeps adapting as he keeps saying, I'm water. Like, I'm just like water. I just flow. I just go places. I do things I have to do. So, when you look at him, you say to yourself, like, he's going to have to do the things. He's going to have to continuously be the third scorer. That's what he's going to do. He's going to have to continue to be the third scorer. He's going to have to cut to the basket when shots aren't falling for Maxey or PG like he did Monday night against Charlotte. He's going to have to take over on certain stretches. So I believe that's how his role is going to have to continue to be, doing things like that, because let's face it, they're not going to be able to win games unless he does that. They need a third scorer, and he welcomes it. He loves it. He's excited that he's going to have plays ran for him, but at the same time, he has to take over and do things like that for them to be successful.
And he already does a lot of little things off ball, and continuing to do that on ball when he has the opportunity to do so is going to be huge. So Kelly Oubre being looked at as a big time player going forward for this team, of course, in addition to Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. So we'll wait and see. He's somebody that I have really liked being on this team since the 76ers were able to get him. So looking forward to see what he can bring. But we want to touch on, too, the overall offense in just a moment, what that looks like without Joel Embiid, what that looks like with the big fella. In addition to that, also Paul George stepping up, but having to make it a little bit more consistent going forward. Remember, it was one game, people, where we saw the best of the best of Paul George, and the 76ers going to look to figure that out, especially against the Hornets in the matchup later this week. And talking about the Sixers and the NBA and everything in between, there is no better feeling than experiencing these games live in the atmosphere, cheering on your favorite team, whether it's the NFL, whether it's the NBA, and everything in between. But we're going to stick with football and look at the Steelers versus Ravens at M&T Bank Stadium. There's a super deal. going on right now, the top 1% value, row 5, section 107, all in for $520. And then there's also an amazing deal at the upper sideline. If you don't want to spend in the 500 range for that game, you can be in the top 5% value for the upper sideline. Make sure you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Make sure you download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. And did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely has happened to me. A lot of streaming platforms you want to be able to use, and then sometimes you say, all right, maybe I want to cancel my subscription, but you tend to forget about it and it lingers on just a little bit. I've had that happen a few times, and Rocket Money has made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on today. Once again, rocketmoney.com/locked on today. All right. So, really, the best offensive performance we saw from Paul George last time around, having the best game as a Philadelphia 76ers. Tyrese Maxiell going out there having a 40-point game as well. But you look at it and you say, all right, well, that happened against the Charlotte Hornets. But for the Philadelphia 76ers, they have lost to teams that they should have won against this year. And we've seen that throughout the season. I think you need to have more performances like that if there's any hope for this team going forward. Because realistically, you look at the status of Jared McCain. He's out indefinitely. Maybe with that recovery and the meniscus tear, you get him back in the postseason if the Philadelphia 76ers can make it there. Joel Embiid is still out. He's still being reevaluated. So when you look at this offense, Keith, I know that it was against the Hornets, but where do you look at it going from here? I'm talking without Joel Embiid because you have the Hornets and you have the Cavs coming up. And for this team right now, to me, Paul George needs to have really good performances going forward. But where else in this offense maybe do you see some struggles, or where do you see some positivities on the other side where they can build upon into their next few games?
Yeah. It's weird because when we talk about the improvements that they have to make and how they are playing, the first thing we got to point out is that right now the 76ers offense is ranked 27th in the league in offensive rating, right? At 107.3 points per 100 possessions. Now, the crazy stat is the 76ers their points per possession is 111.5 without Joel Embiid. So they're actually a better offensive team when Embiid doesn't play. So when you put that 111.5, they would go up and they would be ranked 17th in the league. So the offense would be in middle of the pack. And I think what it is I think that they can get out more when Embiid is not around, get out in transition. Paul George is more in attack mode. The same with Maxey. Other guys feel like, they can get more of a flow. And I think that they got to take advantage of that. I think they have to just keep up the tempo, feed Kelly Oubre on lobs and breaks. The same thing with KJ Martin. But yeah, like right now, when we look at this offense, unfortunately, it's been better in the games that Joel hasn't played. And I get it. I get the game that Joel had 30 something points and against Chicago. But for the most part, you know, the ball it hasn't been as clunky as it is when Joel's in there. So they have to take advantage of all that. Now the problem is, what do you do when he comes back? When he
Right.
comes back next week? That's the main concern. Like, how do you get the offense to be a little bit more fluid when Joel Embiid is on the floor?
And it's when you look at Joel's career too, it's really just the staple of how the team has played. And especially in the last year, you look at Tyrese Maxey and the two-man game between him and Joel Embiid. It works, right? But when Joel Embiid is on the bench and there's sets where Nick Nurse is putting Tyrese Maxey out there, you see Tyrese running up and down the floor and kind of doing his thing. Joel is a player that is a little bit slower to get back. They set up the offense for him because at the end of the day, your goal is to get the ball to Joel Embiid, and that's the guy you're waiting for to come back. At the same time, though, when this offense is used to going out and running, that can really affect some guys. Who do you see it affecting the most when Joel Embiid comes back? We already know with Paul George hasn't gotten going in the three-man game yet, and that's clearly a concern going forward. But who does this offensive switch kind of affect the most? Because you're right. You're going from a very quick up and down the floor offense where you can put in some of those younger guys to when Joel Embiid does come back, the game does slow down on the offensive side just a bit.
You know, I think a person who it would impact the most would be a guy like a Ricky Council.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it also, to believe it or not, it also has a negative effect on like Yabu Selly a little bit because he's asked to do certain things, but he also is not going to get the shots. He has to shoot the ball up, and he has to make shots. But if not, he loses a lot of his impact when he doesn't make shots. But when he's on the floor with them, he's not going to get a lot of shots, right? But me personally, if I was Nick Nurse, you know what? I know that Paul George isn't in the James Harden mold. He's not that type of player. But I would take the ball out of Maxey's hands and I would run an offense similar to what they did in the past, where we're
Mhm.
going to run this thing through Paul George, let him be the guy to distribute the rock. We know we're going to be able to get Maxey going downhill and give him easier baskets, right? And Joel's just going to have to trail and keep up. That's kind of sort of like what he did when they did with Harden. That way you enable other guys, the other wings, to attack too. But when you have the ball in Maxey's hands, he's not his specialty isn't finding teammates, it's scoring points. So it becomes just into a two-man game and they don't do anything. You know what I mean? No one else. So if I was the 76ers, Paul George would be bringing the ball up but once Embiid comes back.
I think that can help Tyrese Maxey too. It kind of evades the pressure of that. He can just move off the ball, do his thing, get open, get those open plays for himself. Still can distribute the ball to Joel Embiid if he needs to, but at the same time, you allow him to kind of be a little bit more mobile in your offensive sets. Does that hurt Tyrese Maxey at all, though? Do you see a situation where Tyrese is so used to bringing out the ball? Because if you look back in history, with other players, kind of more of a vet versus a younger player, you think of Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler, who both wanted the ball in their hands bringing up the rock. Now, I think it's a very different situation. Tyrese Maxey isn't Ben Simmons, and Maxey seems like somebody right now that is willing to really figure it out for the rest of the team. But does it hurt him at all if you're going to make that switch right now to try to get the offense a little bit more fluidity once Joel Embiid comes back?
And I think it helps Tyrese Maxey because when we look at Tyrese Maxey, his stats and yeah, he's averaging 21.5 points, which is the second best in his career. But when we look at his shooting percentage, it's the worst of his career. He's shooting 41%. From three, he's shooting 31.7%, which is the second worst. His worst shooting percentage was his rookie year when he shot 30.1. So to me, and we also look at his assists. Yes, he's averaging 5 assists per game, but that's down from the 6.2 he averaged last season. So, when we look at it, Paul George is basically averaging more assists than Maxey. Maxey's best attribute at this time is scoring. And I feel like, with his speed and his way that, guys can't keep up with him, it's better for him to be off the ball and receiving it as opposed to like trying to set up the pick and roll, trying to do other things. So I just feel like what Maxey is doing right now is taking a lot of tough shots while he's trying to run this offense. And I feel like if he basically got off the ball, then he could streak up the court, do the same things that Kelly Oubre is doing. And there's not a lot of guys in the league that can keep up with him. So I think it would actually benefit Maxey more than it would hinder him.
And in addition to that, help Paul George maybe a little bit more in that three-man game, feel like he's involved, can really distribute the rock and find other ways to get him into the scoring realm. Because as we alluded to before, 3 shots game from Paul George just ain't going to do it for the Philadelphia 76ers going forward if those 3 are playing together. So we'll wait and see. There's still time before Joel Embiid does come back. But that's a really good point to bring up. See if Nick Nurse can make that switch, because he has to know and he has to look at the last game that those 3 played together saying, all right, well, Paul George needs to have a bigger impact. He did against the Hornets, and we'll see how that really develops once Joel Embiid is back in this lineup. Speaking of Embiid, some comments made about him having a similar career, quote unquote, so far as Ben Simmons. We're going to look at the exact quote coming up in just a moment and give our thoughts to see if there's any similarity there throughout Joel Embiid's career on the other side. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return to FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com today. And at FanDuel, you can bet on any sport that you would like, NBA, NFL, everything in between. And really, if you go to FanDuel right now, even if you're new to sports betting, they really lay everything out to you of which games you can bet on, the odds for every single game. But of course, if you love FanDuel and you're already on it, well, here's a game that you can bet right now. The Broncos and the Chargers right now at -3 favorites. And if you want to hit that line right now and some parlays in between, make sure you head over to FanDuel.com. Once again, these odds can change at any given moment. So make sure you head over right now if you believe in that bet and you want to lock that in. America's #1 sportsbook. Be sure to visit FanDuel today to place all of your sports bets. There's no better place than FanDuel to do so. And Build is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points for your rent. Every month, pay your rent when watch Build points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes or redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the points guy at Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuild.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba to start earning points with your rent payments today. All right, so it's never not a dramatic day with the Philadelphia 76ers. So a little bit of a break in the action in terms of when they play next. And Stephen A. Smith went to go on and say something interesting. And I think people's immediate reaction was, how could you say that? How could you compare the two? But let's look at the quote. He said, let me say this to Joel Embiid in all seriousness. You're about a tad bit away from being compared to Ben Simmons. You bring up the injuries and all of that stuff. I look at the disinterest on his face and the lack of enthusiasm, so on and so forth. Keith, what is your overall take in this with Stephen A. saying, hey, there might be a chance that we can possibly start comparing Ben Simmons to Joel Embiid? Do you see any comparison there to where this season has led the process that they know as Joel Embiid?
You know, I think the delivery was a little bit bad and I mean a little confusing. I think I understand where he's coming from, and you know, I think what he's trying to say is, because you think about it, when Ben Simmons basically held out, and then when he came back and really refused to play for the Sixers, there was some disinterest. Like, you can look at Joel and you can see some frustration right now, right? But I think where Ben Simmons' situation, like when you say it, you got to say it all. Ben Simmons' situation was basically he didn't want to play for the coach anymore, who he felt like threw him under the bus. He
Mhm.
felt like the organization threw him under the bus. Joel Embiid's frustration has a lot to do with not being able to move the way he's used to, not being able to play at that level due to constant knee swelling and things like that. So I feel like that's, yes, you can look at some frustration on the face. I don't know if it's 100% disinterested in playing with the organization. I just feel like as a player who looks like he's upset that he can't play to the level that he's used to. And the one thing I will say is that right now, Joel Embiid is kind of sort of low hanging fruit. He's
Mhm.
a guy that is easy to come out and make and criticize because of the way he's playing. And I guess people have an avenue. I mean, you talk about your platform that you want to talk about, and he does look a little frustrated, but at the same time, I think we're talking about two completely different situations here. One is a guy just wanted out, and another one is a guy who's just frustrated because he can't play to the level that he's used to.
I think really the only comparison might be that, Ben Simmons might want to go out there and play. And he had so much potential coming out of the draft and really so much potential in this organization, never really lived up to it in Philadelphia. Then goes on, gets traded, and it's consistently he's out with the back injury. And there's a lot going on in terms of his health, too, maybe not allowing him to play at the highest level that he wants to. Now, clearly Joel Embiid has accomplished a lot more in his NBA career. I don't think Stephen A was taking away from that. Now, granted, he's going to make his take and he's going to stand on his take. We all know that, and that's what he does. But at the same time, I understand where you can see the comparison and the frustration in terms of the injuries and just that stopping you. Now, overall, Joel's not disinterested in playing in Philadelphia. I think he said it time and time again. He wants to play for the city. He signed an extension. Now, of course, money is a factor there, but he did sign an extension to stay in Philadelphia. But you look at it, and we've talked about it. There's been times this season where we see, okay, Joel Embiid not even going to the line to attempt one free throw this season. That's absolutely crazy. And then he comes back out and has a good game. But you start to almost have concern on how this affects him too, because it just seems like no matter what happens, he goes out there and you're always holding your breath. And it's some freak injury that happens. He gets hit in the face, then he has a sinus fracture, and he's going to be reevaluated. It has to be frustrating with anything that you do, whether it's a job or anything that you might have, saying, wow, I can't do this at my fullest potential. I really want to, but my body is keeping me from doing it. So I see the comparison in the sense of the injuries may be hindering from them playing how they want to play. Other than that, I don't really see a comparison. But you look at it from Joel Embiid's standpoint too, and it has to be frustrating for him to consistently be sitting out when I don't think the 76ers are in a situation now that they're going to be in tank mode. I mean, the Wizards are also in the Eastern Conference too. So the 76ers now more in a position to fight for that play-in spot than they would be in any type of tank mode. And Joel Embiid has to be feeling some type of way to be able to not really to contribute to that at this point in time, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, he's in a position like it's always something.
Yeah.
There's always something, which leads to that. I mean, we talk about it. I mean, after a while, human nature takes over. I mean, your goal is to stay healthy. Last year he had numerous injuries, ailments. He played through it, and then all of a sudden this year comes, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. So you're going to be frustrated. But people have jobs to do, but sometimes I feel like we all go for like the low hanging fruit. It's the easy
Mhm.
thing to say and go for it, and people follow it up. But when you say that somebody's disinterested, now who knows? We can perceive it. You can perceive it that way when you look at it, but when you sit back and you really understand what's going on, it's just frustration. Like it's
Yeah.
your frustration because you can't do what you have to do. But when we say that their career is going to be similar, or remember this one, we're talking about one guy who's a perennial all star. We're talking
Mhm.
about a guy, that same guy who would have won his third consecutive scoring title last year if not for the injury, who would have been the MVP in back-to-back seasons, right? I mean, that like but then we're talking about another guy who was an all-star for 3 years, but he hasn't been one since. A guy who wasn't getting fourth quarter minutes for the Brooklyn Nets, a guy who came off the bench. No, is you come out and you say that, okay, but at the same time, like there's no similarities, not at all, not at all.
And I get people wanting to go after Joel Embiid and being frustrated watching the 76ers. That's understandable. But at the same time, looking at it in the picture that Joel Embiid, how he's played for the city of Philadelphia, and it's just been really those freak accidents that happen, those injuries. And there's been times this season where he was timid, but then Tyrese actually called him out, and Joel Embiid was able to come back out and play like the Joel Embiid that everybody knows. So I agreed. I'm in agreement with you, Keith, that there's really no comparison there as well. Just an interesting quote that came out through the week. The 76ers having a little bit of game break here before they play again on Friday. Well, that just about does it for Locked On 76ers. The 76ers will be back in action on the Friday night against the Hornets once again. That's at home in Philadelphia at 7 p.m. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago saying so long. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.